What image do you envision when the term castle is mentioned? Your mind likely pictures scenes from folklore: towering turrets, banners swaying in the breeze, and elegant women in extravagant attire peering from balconies. Dismiss nearly all visuals from cinematic depictions. In reality, a medieval fortress was not primarily a residence. It served as an arsenal. To grasp the essence of a castle, imagine a military fort rather than a royal residence. Consider a contemporary armored vehicle or naval ship. Its core function wasn't to amuse attendees at lavish events, but to manage land, safeguard its owner, and endure relentless sieges. Each structural aspect aimed directly at this goal. The need for ease was negligible, even if acknowledged. Consider this. The formidable walls weren't symbolic. They were designed to repel assaults and projectile weapons. The narrow arrow-slit windows served no purpose beyond allowing archers to shoot safely. These iconic spiral staircases, always rotating clockwise, compelled attackers to struggle with their weapons' reach. Existence within this colossal fortress resembled a grim reality more than a whimsical legend. The inner chambers exuded an unyielding chill and subdued light. Winds howling through stone corridors could snuff out flames, and a ceaseless dampness seeped into your core even beside a blazing hearth. The atmosphere carried thick smoke, ash, and candidly unpleasant aromas. The fortress was not a warm refuge. It was a bleak, utilitarian stronghold, a shield of safety in a lethal landscape. This approach will guide our examination of its features. If a citadel operated as a mechanized war system, it required a trained team to maintain it. Imagine it not as a private residence, but as a dynamic corporate headquarters merged with a strategic garrison. It functioned as an isolated community with a strict, well-outlined structure. Every individual, from the noble in his private chamber to the kitchen servant scrubbing vessels, held a distinct duty, with the group's endurance relying on each fulfilling their assigned task. The pinnacle of this structure was naturally the lord and his household. He embodied the roles of chief executive, head military authority, and ultimate arbiter simultaneously. His decree held absolute power. He possessed the fortress and neighboring estates, with core responsibilities involving safeguarding his territory, commanding troops in conflict, and maintaining equity. His wife, the chateau's overseer, held no resemblance to a passive captive. She acted as the principal executor of daily operations. During his prolonged absences, often caused by military campaigns or official obligations, she oversaw the estate's logistical network, ensured supply consistency, and could direct its fortification during an attack. Just beneath them stood the top-tier administrators. This encompassed the knights, the elite fighters who constituted the castle's iron core. They were vassals who swore allegiance and provided military support to the lord in return for land or maintenance. Daily management was managed by principal administrators. The steward, or seneschal, served as the chief administrator, managing the castle's finances and internal matters. The constable led the security forces, managing the garrison and the castle's defenses. The marshal oversaw the stables, a vital position, as horses functioned as the tanks and transport aircraft of the medieval era. Following were the expert workers, the specialists responsible for maintaining operational efficiency. The chaplain addressed the spiritual requirements of the castle's residents. Artisans such as blacksmiths, carpenters, and stonemasons formed the essential engineering team, perpetually mending structures, crafting arms, and servicing tools. In the kitchens below, chefs, bakers, and brewers labored nonstop to nourish the hundreds residing within the fortress. At the pyramid's base lay the biggest faction, military personnel and attendants. Military personnel constituted the core of the garrison, professional infantry responsible for guarding the walls. Additionally, there were numerous attendants, horse caretakers, trainers, washerwomen, kitchen staff, and couriers. They served as the hidden force behind the castle, executing ceaseless, arduous tasks that sustained daily existence for all. This was not a silent, desolate stronghold. It thrived as a bustling center of unceasing movement. Abandon the leisurely weekend sleep-in. In a medieval fortress, the day dictated by the sun's ascent, beginning when first rays seeped through narrow slits. The trumpet call or chapel bell's toll would herald the dawn, rousing the citadel as if disturbed by a sudden jolt. Morning commenced not with lavish feasts, but with modest utilitarian sustenance. Most people's breakfast involved a coarse loaf, occasional dairy, or remnants of prior evening's provisions, quenched with a mug of weak ale or brew. Water was frequently contaminated, making low-alcohol beer the primary choice for all, from adults to kids. Subsequently, the castle would buzz with activity. The Lord could convene in the Great Hall, the castle's core facility functioning as an administrative center, judicial space, and dining area combined. Here, he would mediate conflicts among nearby residents, consult his steward on land administration, or strategize combat drills. Meanwhile, in the outer yard, the Bailey, the atmosphere buzzed with metallic clashes as warriors endlessly trained, honing their swordplay and archery skills. This wasn't a performance, steady exercise guaranteed survival. The castle's ruler maintained exclusive authority. She managed the cooking areas, audited supplies of provisions and drinks, and coordinated the staff. Her evenings might involve the inner chamber, family-only space, engaged in crafting or instructing her offspring, yet her responsibilities centered on oversight. For the vast number of workers, each day was a relentless routine of demanding work. Fetching water from the well, maintaining the flames, a full-time endeavor, polishing floors with grit and fragrant mixtures, and arranging the day's central dish. This meal, known as dinner, began unexpectedly early, typically between 10 a.m. and noon. This was the day's most significant social event. All individuals assembled in the grand hall, positioned based on their hierarchy. The master, his kin, and distinguished visitors occupied the elevated table, whereas others used the lengthy benches underneath. The cuisine was abundant, yet lacked consistent sophistication. You would encounter roasted meats, hearty stews known as pottage, pastries, and bread. Spices were frequently employed, typically to conceal the meat's less than fresh condition. Discard the thought of forks. They remained uncommon for centuries. Individuals dined using a knife, a spoon, and their hands. Afternoons were reserved for additional labor, or, among the elite, leisure activities. The Lord and his knights could participate in hunting or falconry, hobbies serving both recreation and nourishment for the elite. With dusk nearing and shadows deepening, the castle's pace eased. A modest meal was presented, after which residents reconvened in the grand hall, aglow with flickering flames and a central hearth. Amusements were limited. Itinerant performers might entertain, or guests engaged in chess, dice, and musical renditions. Evening hours marked the onset of rest. Candles were costly luxuries, leaving people with few options as night set in. The noble couple would withdraw to their secluded sleeping quarters, typically featuring a grand four-poster bed adorned with thick drapes for insulation and seclusion. However, for numerous individuals, rest was a shared experience. Servants and soldiers would spread their straw mats on the great hall's floor or claim a nook in the storage room, prepared to awaken at dawn and repeat the cycle. Let's tackle the obvious issue. How did inhabitants of a stone fortress filled with hundreds of people manage basic hygiene? The actual situation was vastly different from today's world with flushing toilets and regular showers. It represented a realm of creative innovations, shared residences, and odors that would repel a contemporary sense of smell. Initially, the sanitation area. The nearest equivalent a fortress possessed for a personal lavatory was the garderobe. This was essentially a compact stone chamber integrated into the outer wall structure, featuring a floor aperture. Excrement would descend directly along the castle's exterior, frequently plunging into the ditch beneath. The charming ditch encircling the fortress was typically a murky, uncovered drainage. The term garderobe likely stems from the habit of storing garments in these shafts, as urine's fumes combated vermin. Those without garderobe access relied on basic waste receptacles, discarded through windows without ceremony. You quickly learned to avoid stepping on surfaces in the castle's courtyard. How about hygiene practices? Contrary to myths suggesting medieval individuals avoided cleanliness, bathing occurred. It was not a routine individual activity. It required effort and was rare for most. Bathing involved servants moving multiple containers of warm water to a spacious wooden container, often near a heat source. For the nobility, bathing often served as a social gathering, an opportunity to unwind and engage in conversation with visitors. However, for the typical castle inhabitant, a full-body immersion was a rare indulgence. A hurried hand and face cleanse using a cold water basin was standard. Maintaining the castle's hygiene required continuous effort. Massive stone floors were layered with rushes or hay. This served more than warmth. It functioned as a functional method to soak up spills, grease, leftover bits, and animal waste. Canines wandered openly. When the straw grew too contaminated, it wasn't thoroughly sanitized but hastily removed and swapped with a new batch. The atmosphere would have been dense with a strong mix of odors, smoke from fireplaces, grilled meat from kitchens, perspiration from cramped, unclean crowds, and the underlying scent of adjacent toilets and animals. Health treatments were minimal at best. The castle's mistress frequently acted as the primary medic, utilizing plant-based treatments handed down over decades to address everyday illnesses. A severe injury sustained in combat or a minor mishap could swiftly result in a fatal outcome. Without knowledge of pathogens or microbes, illness spread unchecked, with survival depending on chance and endurance. In such conditions, maintaining wellness meant enduring persistent challenges of medieval fortifications. This was the scenario the stronghold was engineered to address. When the guard on the ramparts raised the alert, the whole citadel shifted from a thriving enclave to a sealed, deadly mechanism. A siege wasn't a swift, honorable engagement. It was a harsh, extended strategic game where technical skill, mental resilience, and unwavering strength determined success. The defenders, frequently outmatched in numbers, possessed a single overwhelming benefit: the fortress itself. The initial barricade wasn't the wall's structure. It was the moat, a vast trench, either flooded or kept empty with spiked posts at its base. Its aim was clear: to hinder foes from swiftly accessing the wall foundations via their siege engines and rams. To cross, the adversary needed to construct bridges or fill the moat while enduring arrow strikes from above. If invaders reached the central fortification, the true conflict initiated. The steep stone barriers, termed curtain walls, functioned as the fortress's core defense. Elevated above, the ramparts featured openings for archers to fire and solid segments for concealment. From this vantage, defenders could launch a relentless wave of destruction. In addition to arrows, they would launch large boulders, hurl scalding liquid, or deploy caustic lime, a substance capable of blinding assailants. Unlike cinematic depictions, heated oil was scarcely employed. It was excessively costly and scarce. Boiling water sufficed effectively for the task. Certain fortresses harbored more insidious methods. Overhanging stone structures known as machicolations featured floor openings, enabling defenders to hurl dangerous projectiles directly on the heads of those attempting to ascend or demolish the wall below. The primary entrance, consistently the most vulnerable spot, was strongly reinforced. It typically featured a retractable bridge and a robust iron or wooden gate known as a portcullis, capable of being lowered swiftly. This passage was frequently enclosed by a gatehouse, a daunting edifice with individual barracks and openings in the corridor's ceiling for counterattacks against intruders. The final bastion was the keep, referred to as the donjon. This was the well-protected tower at the core of the stronghold, a citadel nested inside another citadel. If the outer defenses were penetrated, the garrison would withdraw to the central tower for a final resistance. It featured an independent water source, provisions, and accommodations, built to endure prolonged isolation after the main fortress collapsed. The siege entailed a battle of endurance and patience. Assaulters aimed to weaken the garrison through starvation, obliterate walls with projectile weapons, or undermine fortifications by digging beneath them. The defenders needed to regulate supplies, mend structural breaks, and withstand mental and physical decline. In this apocalyptic setting, each structural element of the stronghold, from its tallest spires to its stairwell configurations, faced relentless scrutiny. Chivalric stories frequently depicted females as inert trophies to be claimed, yet the true dynamics of residence within the walls concealed deeper intricacies. The citadel transcended male-dominated domains, operating as a self-sustaining network where females and offspring fulfilled essential, though circumscribed, duties. Their existence formed an intricate mosaic interlaced with obligations, accountability, and unrelenting toil. The highest-ranking female figure inevitably held the title of Mistress of the Citadel. She was the castle's overseer, the key holder, and the head of the domestic sphere. Her emblem of authority was a heavy keyring attached to her waist, granting unrestricted access to all storage areas. She managed an extensive household, controlling provisions, textile production, staff supervision, and financial equilibrium. When her husband undertook military campaigns or royal duties, frequent absences, the full responsibility of managing and protecting the fortress rested on her. Historical texts recount instances of aristocratic women who courageously directed the defense of their properties during enemy attacks. Under her rank were the other female servants of the fortress: attendants, chefs, washerwomen, weavers, and domestic staff. Their existence revolved around relentless toil. They awoke before daylight to ignite the hearths, prepare the bread, brew the ale, and tidy the rooms. Their days were consumed in soot-filled kitchens, humid laundry areas near the river, or weaving fabrics to clothe the entire estate. Their labor was crucial, sustaining the core of the fortress's daily existence. The notion of childhood, as commonly perceived, was non-existent. A fleeting, demanding initiation into the brutal demands of maturity. From an early age, young ones were instructed in their societal duties. For aristocratic males, existence followed a predetermined course toward chivalric status. At roughly 7, a youth was relocated to a noble's stronghold to undergo squire training, acquiring formal etiquette and fundamental military techniques. During adolescence, he would serve as a squire, directly assisting a knight, maintaining his equipment and steed, and accompanying him into combat. For a noble's daughter, learning was focused on household management and political tactics. Under her mother's guidance, she acquired skills in overseeing a home, mastering embroidery, musical instruments, and literacy. Her main goal was to forge a formidable family connection via a calculated wedding, typically set during childhood. Servants and soldiers' offspring faced a more basic existence. They started laboring immediately upon capability, assisting in kitchens, stables, or fields, their fate predetermined by birth conditions. No space for lethargy. Every person had a role to fulfill in this fortified realm. For generations, the stone citadel ruled unchallenged. It embodied supreme authority, stabilized feudal systems, and functioned as a nearly impenetrable stronghold. A well-constructed, fully supplied fortress could endure prolonged assaults lasting months or even years. Yet the world transformed, and an innovative breakthrough from the east threatened to obsolete these colossal strongholds. This breakthrough revolved around gunpowder. The introduction of cannons to European battlefields in the 14th and 15th centuries reshaped military dynamics. Ancient artillery was basic, erratic, and cumbersome to prepare, yet its destructive force was undeniable. A siege engine might gradually erode a fortress's defenses over months, but a projectile could penetrate them swiftly. The element that fortified strongholds, vertical thick stone barriers, ultimately became their downfall. Rather than absorbing the force of a stone missile, a tall wall became a larger, immovable focus for cannon fire. A precise strike didn't merely dislodge some stones, it could crack an entire segment, resulting in a significant gap. Fortification engineers urgently revised designs. Recent defensive structures known as bastion forts featured reduced height, reinforced earthworks capable of withstanding cannon fire. Traditional high castle structures proved ineffective against firearms. The renowned 1453 siege of Constantinople, wherein colossal artillery shattered millennium-old fortifications, signified a pivotal moment. The era of castles had concluded. Around this period, the political framework was evolving. Strong monarchs and centralized authorities arose, supplanting the decentralized influence of regional nobles. Rulers controlling national forces and revenue streams managed to acquire costly artillery, unlike isolated nobles. This centralization of authority led to a decline in conflicts among nobles. The necessity of a private stronghold for safeguarding one's family and territories started to diminish. With their strategic importance waning, fortresses underwent an extended evolution. Numerous structures were left unused, descending into charming decay as the environment reabsorbed them. Alternately, some were reconfigured as opulent rural residences and elegant manors. Defensive structures like moats, parapets, and narrow slits were either dismantled or preserved as nostalgic, ornamental aspects. The emphasis moved from security to leisure, from military apparatus to opulent living spaces. The cold Great Hall was substituted by refined sitting areas with expansive windows added to allow natural illumination. Currently, these impressive stone constructions serve as mute reminders of a vanished age. They no longer function as hubs of authority or stern fortifications of endurance they previously represented. Rather, they function as portals to history, evoking our thoughts through stories of warriors, attacks, and an age when existence was more arduous yet less complex. They urge us that even the strongest fortress may ultimately fall to an innovation,